small perspective of it, that is thinking and translation. Our group members are Abhishek, Tangiva, Gurinder, Hetal, Niranjana, Raji, myself, Varun, Venkat, and Naresh. And the outline of the talk is, we are dividing up talk into three parts. The first part is the expression of thought into language. Well, in the first part, we mainly deal with the idea of translation to the Polish language of thought. The second part is the tip of the tongue phenomenon, which will discuss about the errors which occurs in the translation process from mentalese language to the natural language, and one of the phenomena is tip of the tongue, which errors, it's one of the errors which propagates. The third part is the principle which guides the translation process, and we'll build on the tip of the tongue phenomenon and we generalize the translation process in general. Now, I'll proceed on with the first part. Why language is at all required for thinking? If you answer this question, that why do we require language for thinking, then we can argue that as Fodor proposed, that we have a language of thought, which is the mentalese, and how it is related to the natural language. So, in meaning that the thoughts are structured in our mind in such a fashion that they have the same structure as the structure of the language. And now in our mind there is a one-to-one correspondence, not exactly one-to-one correspondence, but there is a mapping, a complex mapping between the structures or structure of thoughts and the structure of language. So after studying this correspondence, this whole process of thinking involves in the mentalese, and then as being humans, we need to build on this. We need to translate our thoughts to the natural language, and for that we need any means of communication, and we call that means of communication as language. There are different types of translations which occurs, like the inter-language translation, the inter-language translation, and the inter-semiotic translation. Now, we have to basically build on that how these type of translations involve the basic aspects of translation. So my friend Abhishek will talk about the Fodor's language.
Good morning, all. Now I present some of the highlights of Fodor's theory of language of thought and critiques regarding the theory. As you can see, Fodor's theory says that it's a standard argument that the meaning of thought is an innate language that is distinct from all spoken languages and is semantically complete. So, this language of thought he describes as a mentalese, and mentalese contains the conceptual resources necessary for human thought. That is, we think and we represent that in our brain in the language of mentalese according to this theory. So I can say that mentalese contains the conceptual resources necessary for human thought, and so it is a basis of thought and meaning. And 5 components of the theory are representational realism, linguistic thought, distinctness, nativism, and semantic completeness. Coming to representational realism, it is like to think a thought with a given content is to be appropriately related to a representation with the right meaning. That is, the thought is a representation with the right meaning in the brain, in this language of mentalese. Now, linguistic thought is coming to linguistic thought, it is supported by productivity. That is, if you take a sentence like I come here and I can construct so many sentences by expanding the concepts. That is, I come here by walk, I come here by walk from so and so place. So it's all concepts and sentences related. Hence, this linguistic thought supports this theory in relation to that. We need concepts and sentences to frame the language. And distinctness. So Fodor says that this theory is distinct to all the languages that we speak, like English, Hindi, and it is completely different from every language. And nativism. he argues that humans and every other thinking species get this language innately, that is, it's innate. It's not acquired or something like that. And it is semantic completeness, like we can express everything that humans can comprehend in this language. So, yeah, coming to the points that favor this theory, it is introspection. That is, if we introspect ourselves, like we think that occurrent thoughts are in the language that we speak. Like if a thought comes to me, it's in the language that I speak. But it may be the case that it's actually in the language of mentalists and we are just representing it in English or whatever the language we speak. So, introspection is a point that favors this language of thought, that is mentalist. And it's also possible that there's a vast amount of unconscious states and unconscious processes going on. And we may say that these are all happening in the language of mentalist itself. So some critics to the theory, for this theory. The problems are that first thing is computational nature of the central system. If you take the computational theory of language, or computational theory of mind, it says that at the core there is computation. But according to this theory, it is mentalist that the information is processed. So this is a critique to the theory. And the nature of symbols. We don't know exactly how symbols look like in mental representation. So we can't say that mentalist has particular symbols and mentalist is a particular language. And third is fresh cases of ambiguity that my friend Varun speaks about. And alternative to this theory is spoken language hypothesis. That is, we have thoughts, and it may be the case that thoughts itself are related in the medium of English. Like there is no mentalist at all, and we can say that these thoughts itself are represented in English. But research shows that children and even some other thinking species, even they can think without having any knowledge of language like English or Hindi like that. So we can say that mentalist is necessary for thinking. And Fodor actually quoted in 1975 as, you need a language in order to learn a language. And he quotes it as a mentalist. And Chomsky's argument is that you don't need a language to learn a language, but you need a language acquisition device to learn a language. And he quoted it as universal grammar. But the grammar itself needs a language to be represented, and that language is mentalist according to Fodor. So it's 50-50. And so hence to have linguistic thought is to have a token of mentalist explicitly formulated in the brain. And hence we are connected to an innate language of thought with predicates that express the primitive concepts.
Good morning, friends. Abhishek has briefly discussed about the language of thought, that is mentalist. Now, the question is how the expression of thoughts occur. Do we express the thoughts in mentalist? No, of course not. We need a natural language to express our thoughts. So, to express our thoughts, there is a translation happening from the mentalist to the natural language. Now, to explain this, that there is a translation happening, we are taking an example of tip of the tongue phenomena, which is another kind of a translation error. Now, in this tip of the tongue phenomena, we are actually unable to express a word temporarily. Now, so what is this actually? What this tip of tongue phenomena is? In this, we can define it in very simple terms that it is the experience of being temporarily unable to retrieve a known word. Now, we can see that the tip of the tongue phenomenon is subjective feeling that people have of being confident that they know the target word for which they are searching, but they cannot recall this word. They are somewhat able to recall words of similar sounds and meanings, but not the actual word they are seeking. So this tip of tongue is an experience with memory recollection involving difficulty retrieving a well-known word or familiar name. Now, is it really a kind of memory problem? No, there have been studies on the Alzheimer and dementia patients, but this phenomena was not observed in these patients. So surely this is not a memory problem. So what this tip of tongue phenomena, what kind of problem it is? It has been described by different disciplines, have been studied under various disciplines, and there are various approaches to this phenomena. Like the psycholinguist point of view, they focuses on the tip of tongue phenomena as a temporary breakdown in lexical retrieval. And the classical linguist point of view is that the tip of tongue phenomena occurs because of synonymous words in the lexicon, which leads to the phenomenon of blocking of original words which needs to be recalled, and also that the lexicon might at times of tip of tongue prompt the wrong words, in the sense that the words prompted are phonetically and semantically almost the same but nonetheless incompatible. Linguists also claim that bilinguals or polylinguals have more chances of tip of tongue phenomena than the monolinguals. And the cognitive scientist point of view is that tip of tongue phenomena is simply the state of temporary inaccessibility or the feeling of temporary inaccessibility. And even the cognitive point of view is that the thoughts in we have the thoughts which are in the language which is Mentalese as proposed by Fodder, and they are translated into the natural language. Now, how we look at this phenomena? What is our perspective? Now, one thing is that we are surely that there is a feeling that people have of being confident that they know the target word, but for which they are searching, but they cannot recall this word. So they are somewhat able to recall the words of similar sounds, meanings, but not the actual word. So this is the common observation we have. Now, but is this phenomena is only restricted to the words? Now, this is not the case. The phenomena can be observed with even the sentences and concepts, which Varun is going to discuss in detail. Now, the psycholinguist and linguist point of view is that the language of thought is the natural language. But if the language of thought is the natural language, then we need not to have any kind of translation process. And if that is the case, then we should not observe the phenomenon of tip of tongue. It should not occur if there is no. If the thoughts are directly expressed in the natural language, so there is no translation, there is no Mentalese, that the thoughts are coming up directly in the natural language, then we should not observe the tip of tongue phenomenon, in which the person has the word in his thought but is not able to recall the word. So our point of view is that there is a problem in the translation. Actually, the words are there in the thoughts, but why we are not able to recall the words? Because there is the error in the translational process. So the other point of view is that this domain of tip of tongue domain is not restricted to just the you can say words. It's also observed in the sentences and concepts. Varun is going to discuss further.
There's 5 more minutes.
Hello guys. Two things. There will be no more change of appearance. There is no more person doing that. And from here, probably I'll take it and take it to a different, give it a new turn. Looking at a higher viewpoint of how this translation, the mentalese, the language that we use and all those things, the whole argument from a different picture. But to talk about that, I just need to introduce a few more things about the vagueness in whatever we speak. I mean, let it not be a communication altogether, but it can be the thoughts in itself, what we think about, or what we communicate, and all those things. Now, when we consider the vagueness, we speak about several sentences. Say, for example, the thoughts that you guys have, the thoughts that you guys share with each other, and all those things. If you look at it, they are not precise, I would say. I mean, if that's the word that I can use. It involves so much of vagueness and so much of, it's loosely built that you have to throw few more sentences to make it clear. But of course, the communication still happens and everything. So when you look at this particular phenomenon, which is involved in the communication of vagueness, and if you ask the question, where does the vagueness lie? Is it because the language is completely incapable of communicating anything precisely? Or is it just because the mentalese, the thought that you construct itself, if we take that theory for granted right now, has a vagueness inbuilt to it. So basically it divides on two sides, whether the language that you use, the spoken language, has a vagueness, or the thought that you construct itself has a vagueness. Of course, I mean, I may not give examples about the vagueness included in the spoken language. There are several examples, the borderline phenomenon and all those things, where the concept itself that we talk about in the linguistic perspective doesn't clearly specify what it's talking about. I mean, I've given the examples there. I'll not get into the distinction between ambiguity and vagueness since I'm running out of time. The last point, vagueness in mentalese. First of all, mentalese itself look like a unicorn which can't be found. So I don't know how we can talk about vagueness in that particular aspect. Now going back to the argument that we have built up till now, I think I don't have much time to give a clear picture. We were heading, I mean, what would be the climax of the movie. But what I can say is that we can consider two sides for the argument about whether the mentalese is required altogether in our understanding of language and the thought process, and see how the debate goes on from there. Say, for example, the first argument is that of course we have linguistic thoughts, but at the same time we have non-linguistic thoughts as well. I mean, the so-called double quotes, end quote, and this one, the argument of using of images in the thought process and all those things. And the second point which goes for mentalese is that you understand a particular the meaning of the whole sentence, and you can paraphrase it in different ways. Basically, you get the gist of the sentence, and you can frame different sentences out of it. So, which signifies that like you have a inherent meaning altogether, and you use several different words which is given by the spoken language to represent it. Probably I'll skip the rest of the thing because I have like 56 seconds. The idea was that to bring about all this argument and finally connect it to our the whole activity that we do in our living time, about thinking, about expressing our thoughts, about understanding of anything. I mean, we have been talking about communication, language, clarity of thought and all those things. But the bigger picture that we have to understand all these things is in the process of understanding. But what is this understanding, and what is that we talk about when we say we have clarity about thoughts, about understanding a phenomenon for that matter and all those things? How much time I have? 30 seconds. My note says 10 seconds. So I wanted to talk about or explain how the translation process is required, and how mental is or could be argued. There are two arguments: the longer spell of tip of tongue, or is that only we're talking we frame the thought. That was the bigger argument that I was trying to make, but my partners were a bit greedy. So yeah, I'll stop at that, or if I have time, I'll continue with it.
Questions?
First of all, if I'm not the right person, I'll call the person to answer your question.
You can't back response.
Okay, so assuming that mentalese is the language that we think now, and also, so when it comes to translation of mentalese translation of thought from mentalese to expressing it in some other language. Well, there's always this notion associated with the concept of translation that you cannot convey the same meaning, the exact meaning in two different languages, and you can possibly translate them to the most say the closest meaning. So I think you kind of touched upon that when you talked about vagueness and clarity, but I would like you to have some. I would like you to comment on this part, this aspect that translation can never be exact, and the other thing is that
only one question.
Okay.
Yeah, I would definitely take your point. And see, the thing is, what you talk about, the loss of clarity and the fidelity and all those things, people talk about by translating from say French language to Italian language and all those things. But I'm not that sure, because the cognitive scientists are pretty much confident about the translation of mentalese to spoken language. But the thing is, that comes into picture of answering the fidelity of translation if you accept the theory, for that matter. And I still have my doubts.
Let me just add to that. You don't even need cognition science to answer that. Venerable old philosopher of language called Wittgenstein said that even when we are speaking the same language and we are using the same term, there is no guarantee that we have the same representation. Exactly. So, let alone looking at the phenomenon of translation, language in itself, and fidelity of transfer within the same language itself in a communicative act, there is no requirement or a guarantee of there being high fidelity.
Right.
And at the same time, speaking philosophically, it looks like a pessimistic view, because then if that is the case, you're never sure of what you're talking about.
What looks like a pessimistic?
That your thoughts are never translated properly into the spoken language. It's a very pessimistic view, because then throughout your life you have to be doubting yourself whether you're saying the right thing or not.
Yes, sir.
Then how do you get away with it?
So, as far as the individual, so if I know what I'm thinking, I just can't get it into words. I don't doubt my thoughts.
Yeah, but the thing is, now, if you doubt, or if you know that it's getting translated and the translation has the fidelity problem and all those things, you can never be sure of it.
Well, that involves a lot of uncertainty.
That it doesn't happen is something else, but if you choose to constantly be concerned with fidelity, then no one should ever speak, like Cratylus did.
We just take so many things for granted by communication. It's just not the words that we use.
No, but that's the point, is that even things that you take for granted, fidelity is not a presupposition.
Yeah.
Anyway, so one thing that I'm glad that you guys took a look at Fodor's language of thought and framed your argument around it. See, one of the claims that Fodor makes, and which is tacitly present in some of these arguments, is there is one language of thought, which is actually the language that allows you to bind together the different, that mentalese allows you to say, when you say the concept dog, because you have a mentalese representation for dog, it allows you to bind together the auditory, the visual, the concept, all of those different streams through which you represent dog. Right? But what would be interesting, and which I didn't see here, is actually saying that mentalese itself isn't as unified as you think it is. That in fact, most of the translation is happening inside mentalese rather than from mentalese to the other things. And so which is what will tell you that if you take Fodor himself seriously and he says mentalese or language of thought is the core of cognition, and then if you say, therefore, if translation is primarily within mentalese, then of course translation is the core of cognition. I was looking for that.
Yeah, I was about to head towards that. And I'll take your question for Steven.
One of the main arguments that came out from the presentation was you have mentalies and then you need to translate it to a natural language to express your thoughts. But you also mentioned that there are some species which are also capable of thought, but they might not have a natural language. So would you say that they have no way to express their thoughts?
First of all, not through language. But if you ask my take, since my friend presented it, I would say it's my take on it. I would say I'm very much, see, it's a black box. You just can't get away with saying so many things without knowing what's happening inside. But at the same time, we don't know what's happening inside of other people's mind and most mind altogether. Yeah, it's a kind of a question which I don't know whether we can ever be confident about the answer. Whatever answer I may give,
One last question.
Yeah,
You don't have time.
Yeah, one point is that if you see the language-world relation and the intentional content of language, that there is when you translate something, it's not that you translate a particular language to different particular language. You will translate also. You also put in language a particular life word. You try to put. You try to translate a particular culture also. So my point is that if you see the language-world relationship, that world is essentially you admit that world is outside there. But if you take Fodor's view, that methodological solipsism is famous article, methodological solipsism considered as a research strategy in cognitive in psychology. So it seems contradictory that if you take Fodor's view seriously, Fodor's view of methodological solipsism, then the relation between language and world, that relation is cut.
I'll respond to that very quickly. So that's a point well taken, and if you take the radical version of Fodor's view, one can simply not account for environmental and cultural contributions to the formation of language, either natural languages or language of thought. So be it Fodor's...
will not account or account.
Will not be able to.
Yeah, that's
yes,
the same. Yeah.
Yes, we agree. But be it Fodor's language of thought or the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, there is a radical version of it and there is a gradient, and we choose to take a weaker version of it, saying that there are obviously ecological contributions to it.
How can Fodor's contribute to, how can Fodor's thesis contribute to this relationship?
But Fodor is great. We are taking Fodor thesis from not Fodor, but Fodor as the author.
Yeah.
So we don't have to constantly pay homage to what Fodor said. We can take it and take it further, like we did with Sapir-Whorf.
My question is regarding your idea of fidelity of translation. How do you measure? What is the criteria? How do you measure fidelity? What is the least count of it? Because people talk about translation not being exact, not being. How does one talk? How does one bilinguals the language of which one depends on the translation?
Yeah, bilinguals are better than
We take this question over T partly because it's not related to the project. This is about the phenomenon of translation. This is not about translation, its relationship to cognition. So I'll give you a really elaborate answer, but outside.
Okay.